Welcome to Long Lost Friends. I'm Elizabeth Eve King.
And I'm Andrea Goyan. We used to do comedy together when we were 19.
But we lost touch.
And years later, we found each other and discovered
that I'm a painter, performer, writer, Pilates teacher, animal lover, and biologist.
Wait, I'm a painter, performer, writer, Pilates teacher, animal lover, and okay, I'm not a biologist, but we're
long lost friends.
And we're both speculative fiction writers.
And my work has appeared in Metastellar.
Metastellar, for those of you who don't know, is an online magazine. And we publish original science fiction, fantasy, and horror. There's a link below.
Today, we're honored to be talking to Douglas Cole. Doug writes, lives, and teaches in Seattle, Washington. He's published 6 poetry collections, a novella, Ghost, and his novel, The Whitefield, just won the American Fiction Award in Urban Fiction and was a finalist in the thriller crime category. I'm not going to mention all his short story publications, or the show would be more than 5 hours, but today we are going to talk to him about his writing.
But wait, first, we want to meet your amazing dog.
Oh.
Yes.
He was barking at ghosts and took off. So
Oh.
I apologize. He's got passions I can't control.
Well, maybe we'll get him in the next segment.
Yes, he's really cute. We've seen him. He's an adorable dog.
He's a beautiful dog. He gets a lot of attention.
I bet. He looks like a big fluffy stuffed animal that you just want to hug.
People ask to take his picture. I'm his handler. I just take him around and then people want his autograph and pictures. And
oh, I can totally believe that. So tell us about your writing. When did you start writing?
Well, you know, I think I came into writing with a kind of a consciousness, probably early high school. I was in Mrs. Sheridan's English class, and she was this beautiful teacher. I loved her. She was American, but she sort of sported this East Coast sort of pseudo-British accent. She was a theater person, which was beautiful because she took us to the Berkeley Rep for matinees and things like that. Just really charged us up with a love of the arts and writing. Anyway, and she gave us a little assignment one day to do kind of a free writing exercise. And I was sitting next to my friend Jimmy, and we were just kind of goofing off. And in the free writing exercise, I just sort of looked around the room and just described kind of things I saw. And I remember she had a poster of Twyla Tharp on the wall, and that was like where my little paragraph ended. And it was just kind of a stream of consciousness, like I said, nothing controlling it in terms of an idea, just random as possible, because Jimmy and I were trying to kind of like frustrate the authorities. So as random as possible was good. But anyway, when I turned it in, she liked it and read it to the class. And I think in a way that was my first external validation that said, hey, you're pretty good at that. And so that also started me, at the time I wasn't conscious of it, but I think it started me thinking about the ways in which when you write, when you're not trying and you're not in control, but you just sort of let language do its thing, sometimes you stumble onto the beauty or the mystery or things that you didn't intend to find that end up being more powerful and beautiful had you intentionally been searching to try to communicate it.
So then I'm going to ask a question. The question everyone asks, and I kind of hate it, but I kind of want to ask it anyway. Are you a plotter or a pantser?
Wait, say that again. Am I
a plotter or a pantser? Have you heard that before? So
no.
Someone plots.
I haven't heard it.
Oh, okay. I hear
Plotter,
it.
I get, but pantser, I don't know. I mean,
okay, and it kind of drives me crazy because there's a lot more to it than that, but people tend to break it down into this a lot. So a plotter is someone who takes like your novel and plots it out before they begin writing. A pantser is someone who kind of does what you were just talking about, maybe gets a character voice or a single thought and just sits down and sees where it takes them. And then they have to go back and plot usually afterwards. But so that's why it's not really specific. But which are you, Doug?
I understand. I understand your metaphor now. Yeah. I don't think of myself as a plotter. I think of myself more as a panther. Except that with this one, the one that you mentioned that just came out, the White Field, I had the whole plot in mind before I started. I mean, I knew, but it wasn't something I sat down and organized in an outline. I just had the whole story from beginning to end. Well, I kind of had the beginning and the end, and then I just sort of, in a panther-like way, got to fill in the middle. But it had, the structure was a beautiful situation. But after I finished it, I started working on another novel, and that one, I think in a way I almost intentionally wanted not to know where I was going. And that one was just sit down, whatever comes, comes. And that turned out to be an interesting structure, sort of a three-part with three different characters. But in general, I think I'm more of a panther. I certainly with writing poetry. I'm not, you remind me of a thing that James Baldwin once said in that beautiful documentary called The Price of the Ticket. And he said that he had been reviewing novels for a number of years, and he was being assigned, of course, a lot of work by people of color. And he said that he was reading a lot of what he called protest fiction. And he decided, I have to figure out for myself. He said, I had to figure out for myself, am I going to be, a pamphleteer or an artist, was the language he chose, which I think is kind of the same. If you're a plotter, or if you have an intention ahead of time. And I think he was saying he wanted to sort of dive into mystery, as much as he was very much socially and politically conscious, but in his art, he wanted to keep a door open to the beauty and the mystery of panthers, track through the wilderness.
So I'm gonna stop for 1 second just because my diction wasn't good enough. So I like panther and I may keep it.
Uh-oh.
When people are talking about, it's like by the seat of your pants. So it's panther.
Panther.
But I love panther. So I may say I'm a panther from here on out.
Okay, I'd rather be a panther than a pantser. But
Or
what
a
about a
cougar.
panther with pants?
My hearing's not the greatest, so it's probably
Hard
not.
on Zoom.
My brain isn't the greatest, so we're equal.
So can you tell us a little bit about your novel? It's a thriller, sort of takes place in the future a little bit, you said?
And yeah, and also about because I've read some of your short stuff, which is very panthery, by the imagery rich, sort of just all these ideas and images, more than a like straight ahead. This is Mary lost her whatever. Yeah, I know that's not a good description of but you know what I mean.
Or a question.
Oh my gosh, that was so badly put. I just meant that
Yet I understand you clearly.
that you have a lot of poetry in your writing.
Yeah.
And I wondered if that was true in this, because this is a book about kind of hard things, prison and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. The White Field, what's it about? It's about a character who's just gotten out of prison, and he's trying to now rebuild his life and the challenges of that. So in the protest novel category, it interrogates, the reality of, a class structure and the prison system, and whether people get rehabilitated or are, handled in such a fashion where they can then be quote unquote productive members of society, or whether it more or less just keeps people, kind of low in the hierarchy and stuck. And that's kind of what the character is sort of contemplating in his journey is, how do I get out of this? I feel trapped. And so that's really the kind of the plotter version of it, but that's more just a structure for kind of this, like you said, this poetic kind of adventure I wanted to go on, which was to look at, the world kind of through that metaphor of Plato's cave. We're stuck looking at the shadows, and something kind of triggers you to finally turn around and see the truth, or the what's behind the shadows, and that can be a very painful experience. Plato writes about that as being painful in the sense that your eyes aren't accustomed to that light. And so that sort of truth is painful internally, but also in terms of your community, people think you're insane. You're talking about things that they look around and go, what? And so I wanted to kind of play with that as part of the journey this person is on. And that opened the door for a lot of the kind of poetic writing that you're talking about, especially this character who, you know, in his journey maybe indulges in some, you know, recreational kinds of chemicals, and they open doors too. And so that, and then it's interesting because the speculative fiction elements of it kind of came more from that sort of surreal approach. Even though I wanted it to kind of be sort of gritty and urban and real and recognizable to a contemporary reader, I also didn't want it stuck in any kind of time period, even though that's tough to escape too, right? Once you start putting things in there like, you know, telephones and cars, you know, who knows, like 20 years from now, those things will look like, you know, spinning wheels and things. So in that respect, I was trying to undate it. And that I come to you folks by way of Daniel White, who publishes the Mythaxis online journal. And he, in a previous journal he was publishing, chose a section. I sent him a section of the Whitefield to him to publish, and he loved it and published it in his journal, which at the time, I think it was called Unreal. I can't remember what it was called, but it was a specifically speculative fiction journal. And I sent him a section out of it that's towards the end where there are these, the characters on the run and he's being chased, and the things that are chasing him have this very sort of surreal, futuristic, technological kind of quality to them. So anyway, that's what it's largely about.
But I think we've reached a time in writing where the speculative and the literary fiction markets there's a crossover. So we're not so bound by those rules anymore. We can kind of add elements and it crosses both. You'll appeal to both readers, you know, which is really great.
Well, I grew up reading a lot of speculative fiction too. That was the first sort of reading I did. And so I've always loved that kind of future and or alternative world making. And I love it when a writer pulls that off well. And then I love it when it showed up in, you know, the literary world too. People like, you know, Jorge Luis Borges, you know, or Julio Cortázar, when I look at the Latin American writers, or even some of our people here, you know, Don DeLillo's stuff often feels very surreal. And I love that. And I think you're right. It does sort of blur the boundaries between them.
Yeah, and magic realism too, which mingles there. It's not speculative, and yet there's magic in everyday things.
Yeah.
So that's very cool. So with this, though, you had it all in mind. Were there any like surprises when you're writing, like when you're saying what happens here, and then suddenly, you know, you surprise yourself with what happens?
Like I said, I had the plot pretty clear in mind. Character gets out of jail. Character is stuck in this low level, you know, almost below blue collar work. Character gets kind of sucked into a robbery scheme. It goes poorly. And the book's idea came to me from the ending first, is I just saw somebody running, somebody trying to escape. But I filled in the middle parts with a lot of sort of mixture of autobiographical stuff I pulled in just to kind of give it that real feel. And I think what surprised me most in the creation of it was that it got more kind of emotional than I expected. I had just kind of like this flight, but then it ended up being kind of I don't know, more heart. It's a little sadder, more but beautiful. There's some of that I didn't anticipate, and that kind of started happening in the process.
That's nice. That's magic. And yeah, always, you know, using either yourself or people you know just to get that reality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, in fact, I was reading Brave New World recently, rereading Brave New World, but just the fact that he doesn't have any heroes or villains, really. It's just the characters all have this, they're not perfect. Nobody's, so the reality of the situation is much more visceral, I think, than it would be, in a lot of writing where it's like, there's the good guys and the bad guys and the pretty girl and the ugly one. And, it's not that.
Yes, but I think that I found myself more drawn to work, even Huxley too, although I think that you might have put your finger on something there in terms of characters don't always seem to be the most sort of complex, in the sense of his worlds are a little more idea driven. But I do find myself drawn to work where the characters feel really close, complex, interesting, flawed, always flawed, real to me. And there's enough detail like that so that I feel like I'm in the presence of people, the spirit of a real person. And that's kind of, I think, I'm glad you said that, because that's really what I found myself discovering along the way, is the way that I was seeing these characters come to life. That points to another thing that may have fed into the process I wasn't thinking of at the time so much, is that idea that John Keats talked about in his letters, the negative capability it takes to create something of beauty, to negate your own ego and self out of the art in order to give room for the spirit or energy or details of whatever it is you're bringing in, a character or a landscape. And so I think, I was surprised at the way the negative capability of my own process, unconscious as it may have been, kind of started showing things on the page that I found myself very emotional about. Yeah, I don't know how to describe it.
That's always a nice surprise.
Yeah.
I always find if I'm reading something of mine out loud and it makes me cry, I'm like, well, it made me cry, but I'm also kind of usually know that I've hit on something that's usually a little more emotional or universal that probably will affect others,
I like it where you have a character asks a question and you don't know the answer, and then the other character answers you and you're like, oh, that's the answer. I always wonder, so, it's that I've had that happen, and it's such a cool feeling.
That's when it feels like magic.
Yeah, that's when you get the magic.
I think that's kind of the negative capability too, is, for example, I might be writing a piece of dialogue that I remember, but when the dialogue starts rolling, what naturally seems to happen, not true to memory, becomes more vivid, because I'm not worried about, making it accurate.
Yeah. Yeah, I think accuracy can, like, you want to remember things, but your memory isn't accurate anyway. So you can just, it's those the sensual details sometimes that you can remember, the smell that made you feel this way or whatever, or takes you back. But, rather than, some kind of equation.
There's a writer by the name of Patricia Hampel. I don't know if you've heard of her, and she wrote a beautiful essay called Memory and Imagination, in which she talks about how the writing of memoir, the writing of your own experiences, inevitably involves a mix of imagination. And you're going to write things, and you may try hard to keep it accurate, but you'll discover along the way that was impossible to begin with, and then look back and go, oh wait, that's not correct. But she said, and I always thought this was a beautiful part of her thesis, is that the things that the imagination contributes can sometimes be the most provocative thing, and they can be triggers to ways in which the piece has some ideas and meanings that you should be following and exploring that weren't necessarily part of what you set out to discover or say in your rendition of your memoir or your memory.
Yeah.
I think that goes to what you were saying, where you were surprised by some of the deeper elements, because those kinds of things trigger a deeper truth sometimes within you. So you think you're writing about cookies, and suddenly, because I like cookies, Elizabeth, and then you realize you're actually writing about your mother who died, who baked your favorite cook. I don't know, something, just triggers a truth that you weren't expecting, which is always, again, magical.
Magic.
Yeah.
That's what's poetic too. And that's, I think, why I've always sort of felt kind of centered in the world of poetry, is that it almost is a form, set for that sort of discovery, seeking that kind of magic in a way.
Mhm.
But then there are other writers that I've read who write about that. And Patricia Hample's one. Richard Hugo, local Northwest writer, talked about it in a beautiful essay he wrote too in his book Triggering Town. And he talks about when you start off to write, you have to kind of resolve whether your allegiance is to what he calls music or truth. And he says if it's to truth, you're going to get lost, you're going to get stuck. And if it's to music, then you may discover things. And that's the fun. That's the fun of the writing process.
Oh, I like that way. Music or truth. That's kind of cool.
Mhm.
The Triggering Town, beautiful book.
Triggering Town. Okay, I'll try and. So, anything else you'd like to add for our listeners? Any special, like, oh wow, I did this thing and it worked out so well, or not?
Revision. In the process, I mean, you write something, right? And you go, oh, that's beautiful. and then you wait a while.
Yeah.
You come back to it. That's an interesting psychological process because you may hit, like you were saying, Andrea, you'll read it aloud and you go, oh, wow. I didn't know how beautiful it was. Right? I'm feeling quite emotional about that. And one thing I've realized is that those moments are beautiful, but you gotta hold them lightly. And
Kill your darlings, right?
well, but you may, but at the same time, your darlings may return. So as much as you may feel in the moment, this is beautiful, and then a couple of days or weeks later, you go back and go, oh God, I could have done that better. Even give that moment time, and you can come back later and go, I actually made some pretty good choices. So for example, with this book, I write it, I revise it, I send out pieces to journals to try and publish, send it to publishers eventually, then work with a publisher and edit. And I keep feeling like it's getting better and cleaner and better all the time. And then even once it's published, I might still get in there and I'll think, God, I could do this sentence better. And at a certain point, I realize my sense of better is always shifting too. And so I can't even say I know absolutely at any one point what the best way this should be. So I forget who it was. You guys might remember who said that writing is never perfected. It's finally just abandoned. You just, okay, I'm done. And making your peace with that is kind of a beautiful process too. So that you can just accept this piece of writing that at many points you've thought is beautiful, maybe not as beautiful, whatever, but you can go back to it and just accept it.
And move on to the next piece, which is so much part of it. I mean, that's where you're exploring, I guess it's kind of like life. You don't want to live in the back, in your memories too much, except when you're writing. You want to move forward and be in the now. So,
Yeah.
great. Wow, very good.
So we usually end each section with the best thing we learned this week. And so I'm going to start because I always start because I'm just that way. So the best things, well, a couple of things. I was swimming with leopard sharks last week, which was totally cool. Yeah, in La Jolla, all the females, thousands of female leopard sharks go into the shallow waters because their embryos will mature quicker, and also the male sharks don't come and bother them. So you can, and they're just sweet bottom feeders, but they're big. They're about as big as I am. So it's kind of exciting to go swimming with these. So that was super cool. And then I also, I got a piece accepted today into the Great Sci-Fi Journal, which I really, really like. And it was a very weird piece that I'm surprised anyone thought was good. So that's also a nice thing. And then what else? Should I do one more thing?
If you
During
want.
the prohibition, guys wore shoes that had cow prints on them. So when the authorities came looking, they would just find all these muddy cow prints instead of people running around where they were making the whiskey or whatever.
the hooch. You remind me because they used, it's been a while since I've researched this, but so I may have it slightly wrong, but they used women a lot to carry the illegal stuff around because they couldn't frisk them, for one thing. The guys couldn't frisk them at first when they were trying to find out if someone was trying to sell it illegally. So they packed their dresses and stuff full of bottles, which is really cool.
Yeah.
The women were a big part kind of that, of the Prohibition days. So mine is little because, but Elizabeth covered some ground for me, so it's good. I like looking at livescience.com because they have all these weird little things. I keep plugging them because I think they're cool. And they had something about 2 baby albino alligators being born in Florida. They have this, an alligator farm kind of place, but they have these albino alligators that they keep breeding, and they're beautiful. They're so pretty, but they have to keep them basically inside because they sunburn. And they said in the wilds, they usually die because they sunburn. They like to lay in the sun. They're like, oh, that feels really good. And then they die. But they're really cool. So if you look at them, they're beautiful, especially the adults. The babies were cute, but they had a couple of adults behind the guy, the keeper who has them, and they were stunning. They were just like alabaster crocodiles. They're beautiful.
Nice.
But, Doug.
Oh,
Your turn.
You told me you were going to ask me this question, and I've been racking my brain. What I come up with is so much more pedestrian. But in the thing that you asked me to, I put in there that another one of my jobs was acting, right? I'm also actor, which it very much belongs in quotation marks too when I say that. But just here in Seattle, I've just been doing a little bit of like background, extra stuff when movies and things like that, and commercials and stuff like that. And so I was doing one last weekend for this movie called The Year of the Fox. I think her name is Megan Griffiths is directing it, and it's supposed to be set at this beautiful chalet in the Alps, but which it's really at this resort out in North Bend, Washington, just east of Seattle. Anyway, and so the scene that we're in, I'm just a background extra. The scene is just this New Year's Eve party, and we're standing around in this beautiful chalet with the mountains behind us. And this was a night shoot, and so we started at 6 p.m. and went till 6 a.m. And what I learned is that if you stand around for 12 hours pretending to, be at a party holding a drink, your biceps will get as sore or more so had you been doing 10 rep with 30-pound barbells. I came home sore pretending to be at a party.
Funny.
So I guess the moral is don't stay around at parties too long.
Finish your drink.
Yeah. Or just, change your drinking arm or something. I don't know. Thank you so much. And we will talk to you in a very short while.
Thank you for being here.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.